Our textbook's definition of capacity is the upper limit or ceiling on the load that an operating unit can handle. So what does this mean? Say you own a company that makes widgets. And in order to make this widget, you have a machine. And you put in your raw materials. And then before you know it, you're producing widgets. So what is the capacity of this machine? Say this machine can produce 100 widgets every hour. In that case, the capacity of this machine is 100 widgets per hour. As another example, say you work at a restaurant as a server. What is your capacity as a server? Are you able to serve 25 customers every hour? Or maybe you've been serving for a few years now and can serve up to 30 customers every hour. Previously, we learned about forecasts. Capacity planning is its response. What do I mean by this? If you have a forecast that predicts a change in future demand, then it is vital for your organization to match it with appropriate capacity planning. Later, we will explore this in more detail. In the meantime, let's take a closer look at 3 important questions when it comes to capacity planning. First of all, what kind of capacity is needed? In case of your widget factory, do you need more machines to meet future demand? Or do you have enough machines but need more employees to match capacity to future demands? The second question is, how much capacity is really needed? How many additional machines or employees do you need to meet future demand? And then finally, when is the capacity needed to meet the demand? Are you expecting an increase in demand next month or next year? The answers to these 3 questions will affect how you plan for capacity to match future demand. Our textbook talks about several strategic reasons why capacity planning is important for organizations. Let's quickly go through them. First of all, capacity planning gives an organization the ability to meet future demands. Imagine you have the following demand forecast. This is today. This is someday in the future. Now say currently we have the following capacity. Currently, our capacity meets our current demand. But if we don't plan to make changes to our capacity, in the future we will not be able to meet demand. Therefore, using our forecasts and capacity planning together, we're able to make strategic plans to meet future demand. On this note, and similar to a lecture we had when we were discussing forecasts, the time horizon is very important. In order to meet future demand, will you need to build additional facilities? Or will you need to just purchase additional machines to produce additional widgets? Or maybe you just need to allocate existing machines and employees to meet upcoming demand. As you may have guessed, each of these solutions have a different time horizon. Common sense should tell us that it will take a much longer time commitment to plan the construction of new facilities than to plan the purchase of additional widget machines or to reallocate existing machines and resources. Typically, we can think of long-range projects as being those that would take longer than a year to complete. Projects that would take several months to a year to complete would fall into the mid-range, and any project that would be less than a month would fall into the short range. As we've just seen from the time horizon example, many of the capacity planning decisions are long-term commitments. When we were looking at the time horizon examples, you might have also noticed that each project has a different financial commitment as well. Obviously, constructing new facilities is much more expensive than reallocating existing resources. And this is why capacity planning is considered a major determinant in initial costs. Another very important aspect of capacity planning is that it directly affects the company's bottom line. Say today you have the following capacity, say a capacity of 100 widgets. Now say your actual demand was much higher. This actual demand would be your desired capacity amount. and in this case, it will mean you are under capacity. This mismatch in supply capabilities and actual demand can result in loss of business due to angry customers and strained resources. The opposite of this scenario is when capacity is higher than actual demand. This means your company is producing more products than there is a market for. In this case, we would say that your company is at overcapacity. The result of producing too many products than are needed and being at overcapacity will be unnecessarily high operating costs. As I've just demonstrated, capacity planning can have a huge impact on a company's bottom line. Capacity planning can also affect a company's competitiveness. Imagine you work at a company and you're not able to produce enough widgets to meet demand, and so you lose customers who end up going to one of your competitors. Let's look at another example. Say there is a sudden increase in demand, and due to your proficient capacity planning, you're able to more quickly ramp up production of your product than your competitors. Clearly, in this case, your company will have the competitive advantage. And then finally, when capacity is appropriately matched with forecasts, it makes management much easier. Once you have forecasted future demand, there are several considerations you need to be aware of that would directly impact your capacity needs and therefore your capacity plan. The first consideration is the time horizon, which we spoke about in detail in a previous lecture. Let's look at just one example. If the only way you can possibly meet future demand is by constructing new facilities, you need to be aware that this is not a short-term solution. Such a solution may be a great strategy to meet long-term demand, but your company may also need to, in the meantime, find a short-term capacity solution to meet its forecasted short-term capacity needs. Next, let's look at how different forecasting patterns can affect capacity planning. Say you have a positive trend line showing an increase in future demand. And in this graph, I've zoomed in on today. So here we have today's demand, and everything after that is future demand. Now, say today we have the following healthy capacity, which is able to comfortably meet today's demand. However, if we don't start planning for future capacity needs today, our organization might find itself at undercapacity and unable to meet future demand. In this scenario, what recommendations would you give this organization so that it can prepare its current capacity to meet future growing demand? Next, let's look at the negative trend pattern. Once again, here I have zoomed in on today's demand, and everything after that represents future demand. And like last time, we currently have a healthy capacity cushion to meet today's demand. However, if I don't take steps today to address the future negative growth trend, my production line will soon be at overcapacity. In this case, what recommendations can you give me so that I can better prepare my production line's capacity to meet the future demand? Finally, let's now apply the same considerations to the seasonality and the irregular demand pattern. If you were to apply a constant capacity level to each forecast pattern, you would notice that in some cases, here marked in red, you will be at overcapacity, and at other times, you will be at undercapacity, here highlighted in blue. So what advice would you give a company facing a seasonal demand forecast, which is more cyclical, and what advice would you give the other company, which is expecting a stable but somewhat more random demand? So far, we've mostly been looking at capacity planning for products. Now, we're going to look at capacity planning for service industries. And here we have a happy-looking service rep, and then compare the two by seeing how they differ in the following 3 ways. Say you have a need for an amazing new green gem, and you know just the place to buy one. You jump in your car, drive to the store, and you make your purchase. Once you made your purchase, as in this case, the physical location of the store no longer has a role in the utilization of a new product, in this case, the enjoyment of your new gem. However, this is not the case with services. What if you're planning a trip to New York? Or maybe even just planning a night out with your friends for dinner and clubbing? In these cases, I think you'll agree that you need to actually be in the airplane, in a restaurant or club to enjoy the services that you're paying for. That's why we say, for services, capacity and location are very closely tied together. Next, we'll look at how inventory can affect capacity. When a business has a physical product, it can hold inventory to help manage future demand. As long as this store has enough gems in its inventory, it will be able to make sales. Additionally, if this shopkeeper forecasts an increase in demand, not a problem. He can call in an order, or in this case produce more gems, and then restock his inventory, and then make future sales. This means that shopkeepers can be prepared for when demand is expected to increase or if demand is expected to decrease, otherwise known as managing demand volatility. The problem with services is that you cannot store a service for future use. If an airline is only able to sell 5 tickets, or if only 2 parties come to a restaurant, the service that come from people using those seats and tables cannot be stored for another time. Therefore, capacity must match the timing of demand. Whereas earlier, when we were selling physical products, the inventory stored our products, which acted as a cushion to offset high and low demand. This is impossible with services, which brings us to the issue of demand volatility with services. For this, let's look at 2 examples. An upscale restaurant will generally expect lower demand during weeknights and a very busy weekend. This can be a challenge for them because they will be losing money during the week from all the unseated tables, but they need this excess capacity to meet their weekend demand. The opposite is true when we look at corporate hotels. With businessmen and women generally traveling during the week, we can expect these hotels to have a peak demand during weeknights and a bunch of empty room or excess capacity during the weekend. I'd like you to think about this for a minute. What kind of recommendations can you come up with to help the restaurant and hotel deal with their excess capacity?